So I think just so that we stay on time, inshallah, brother Afnan or sister Huda, I think we could start, inshallah.
Sure. Assalamu alaikum, everybody. Thank you for coming. We've been working really hard on our MYI report. And it means a lot that you guys all came out today. We have some really good speakers, and they'll be talking about mental health in Islam, how is that defined, as well as defining mental health in general. So I'll introduce Dr. Usman Umarji. He is a very qualified gentleman, mashallah. He has a bachelor's in electrical engineering, a master's and PhD in educational psychology from UC Irvine, and he studied, I believe, Islamic law at Al-Azhar University in Cairo, Egypt. And he really helped us with the data analysis. He played a pivotal role in the report overall. So I'll pass it on to Huda.
Jazakallah, Brother Afnan. I'd like to welcome Dr. Farah Islam. Dr. Farah, PhD, is a mental health advocate, educator, and researcher. She explores mental health and services access in Canada, racialized and immigrant populations, and orients her research and community work around breaking down the barriers of mental health stigma. Dr. Farah is a senior fellow in the Data and Psycho-Spiritual Department at Yukon Institute. She has taught courses in Muslim mental health at the University of Toronto, Islamic Online University, and the Islamic Institute of Toronto, and currently serves on the Expert Advisory Committee for the Muslim Women's Shelter, Nisa Homes. So please welcome Dr. Farah. I'd like to pass it back off to Brother Afnan now.
Yeah, so Dr. Usman, you can go ahead and start now, I believe.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It's an honor to be here with you all today. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless our gathering. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us strong iman. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us good well-being and mental health. Allahumma ameen. So essentially what I want to just kick off here is that, alhamdulillah, with a great collaboration between YM and the Yaqeen Institute, right? We, as many of you are on this webinar, participated in this large national survey of understanding what are Muslim adolescents and teenagers and young adults going through when it comes to their well-being, their religiosity, sometimes some of their, the other mental health challenges they're facing, relationships. So inshallah, on this webinar, we'd just love to share with you some of those insights as well as what we can do about them. So, maybe Dr. Farah, if you want to kick us off. First, when people think about mental health, think about so many different things, right? Some people think about like, well, it's just this bad word, right? And what is mental health, first of all?
That's right. That's a great question. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, everyone. So nice to be here. Alhamdulillah. So I actually wanted to throw that question back out at everybody else. I was wondering if you guys wouldn't mind, we're going to have a little bit of an interactive component here. If you can go to menti.com, you should see it on your screen right now. And if you put in that code that you see, 98229461, everybody can type in 3 responses. What are the first 3 words that come to your head when we say Muslim mental health? What does that mean? Just your thoughts. And you can see everyone's word should start popping up. So you can do it on your phone if you want, whatever you have, inshallah, whatever screen you have in front of you. So go to menti.com and put in that code, and everybody's results should start popping up over there, inshallah. I'm going to do it too at the same time. But I can also talk it while we talk. So normally, if we're talking just about mental health generally, often the words that come up are things like, cognitive health, someone's emotional health, psychological health, their behavioral health, or their social health, right? These are kinds of the words that pop up. But if we're talking about Muslim mental health, we're of course saying that there is sort of an intersection, or this sort of meeting of faith as well as mental health. And that's kind of, the space that Dr. Uthman and I work in. So yeah, you guys are all bringing up these words as well. So prayer, spirituality, deen, dua, right? You're bringing those into this idea of mental health. And on the mental health side, you're talking about depression, challenges, therapy, going for therapy, being a minority, right? Being part of a community, all of that. So for example, the UN, or the United Nations, defines mental health as a state of well-being in which an individual realizes his or her own abilities, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively, and is able to make a contribution to his or her community. And you guys are bringing up all those different parts, right? So mental health really is a sort of a multifaceted a construct. And what we really wanted to, particularly Dr. Uthman and I really believe that, we don't just talk about mental health as the absence of mental illness, right? You can live with mental illness, you can live with serious mental illness and still live a completely thriving, a wonderful life with full of positive mental health and well-being. And so we also, within our research, and Dr. Uthman used a lot of these outcomes within the YM report as well. Just there are measures of, resilience, of mental strength, positive mental health, and well-being. And you guys are all bringing those up as well, mashallah, so fantastic. So I'm gonna stop sharing a screen right now and we'll have another question later as well. But mashallah, great ideas. And so I think the next question we actually had wanted to ask about was, what is the most important factor? We wanted to ask you guys, what's the most important factor when you think about Muslim mental health? Think about, we did it, mashallah, Dr. Uthman and Dr. Tamer, they did a great analysis from the YM data. What do you think would be the most important factor when it comes to Muslim mental health? And so you guys can, pick out of one of these. You should still be able to see it. So gender, age, religiosity, sleep, and relationships. So think about parental relationships, peer relationships. Okay, we're getting some guesses for religiosity. You guys can just pop in all your guesses, inshallah. And then Dr. Uthman will take it away there and tell us, what did the report really find? Yeah, these are great. These are great guesses here, mashallah. All important, of course, to Muslim youth mental health. So you guys, so I'm thinking, okay, everyone's thinking religiosity and relationships. These are good. These are good. You guys can keep putting your answers in. Dr. Uthman can talk to us, inshallah, as we do that.
Jazakumullah khair. So just like Dr. Farah mentioned, like there's so many dimensions to mental health. So one thing that we want to be very keen about is there's different things that contribute to thriving and well-being, and there's different things that might contribute to, for instance, depression and anxiety. And when it comes to positive mental health, which is a question Dr. Farah has posed, the strongest predictor by far was actually this holistic religiosity. And I would be very mindful of saying that, holistic religiosity, because it doesn't just mean that somebody prays, right? And that's enough, for instance, religion to have that effect, right? It really needs to encompass a number of dimensions of religiosity. So that was like the thing that we found. And alhamdulillah, that actually matches what we had found previously in a global sample of Muslims. So it looks like whether we're talking about adult Muslims in America, right, in Africa, right, in any other country or continent in the world, the exact same thing we found with our youth. And as people mentioned, the second biggest predictor, right, was actually relationships were central, and both peer relationships as well as parental relationships. And we'll unpack some of those, inshallah, right, in the coming questions, inshallah. Should we go to our third question? So, Dr. Farah, maybe I'll ask you this question then. So, why do you think religion matters so much when it comes to mental health? Especially because when you typically think about going to a therapist, or, especially in American and Western culture, people don't say when you go for mental health therapy or you go and speak to someone and say, I'm having a hard time, they don't say, well, you need to be more religious, right? They say all kinds of these other things. So why do you think that religion matters so much for Muslims?
It's a great question. No, generally speaking, of course, talking about faith or talking about spirituality is often even taboo in the therapy room, right? And we're kind of trying to push for a new movement that considers spirituality. But yeah, I mean, me personally, I feel like subhanAllah, our deen gives us sort of these parameters or these boundaries within which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us to live our lives by. And that protects us from living this sort of nafs-driven life that I think, had we been given free reign or had we not been given those parameters and boundaries, we wouldn't have that opportunity. And this is psychologically good for us because it keeps us away from that guilt that can eat away at us. And also just in a spiritual realm, I think it just gives us immeasurable barakah that we can't even necessarily quantify or understand where that comes from, just from following Allah's ahkam. But yeah, it's very interesting. There's other research as well that has looked at, Muslim youth mental health and found that higher religiosity, just those youth that were more religious, were 40% less likely to engage in risky behavior. So for example, like engaging, drinking alcohol, using illicit drugs, tobacco, gambling, and non-marital sexual intercourse, right? 40% less likely to engage in all of those risky behaviors just if you were more religious. So subhanAllah, just that idea of staying within the boundaries that Allah has given us, I feel really does protect us in a way. Dr. Uthman, what do you think about usually?
I think what you're getting at is that the human being doesn't know what's in their best interest, right? So like, we oftentimes we think, well, I know what's going to make me feel good. I know what's going to make me thrive. And the reality is that we don't as human beings, and especially in this pandemic, as we've seen, elevated levels of mental health problems, Muslims and non-Muslims. But the key is that people often resort to things that are actually maladaptive, right? So many people do things like, hey, I'm feeling stressed, I'm feeling anxious. Let me, say binge watch Netflix, right? Let me vape, right? Let me just start eating a bunch of ice cream and junk food to make me feel better. And these are not the things that make us thrive. So ultimately, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he made us, right? He's our creator. And Allah says in the Quran, "Ala ya'lamu man khalaq," right? Wa huwa al-latiful khabir. That is the one who created not know his creation, right? But of course, he's the most subtle and he's the most knowledgeable. So when the question of why does religiosity matter? I mean, there's some things we can put our fingers on, which are like, we know religion tells us, for instance, to a couple of obvious things. So like be a part of a community, right? And so we know that being a part of a community is a huge part of human thriving and having protection, right? We are told to actually be pro-social and to do and volunteer and to do good things for other people. We know that that's a huge factor when it comes to positive mental health. And then there's things like you mentioned that are actually things we can't exactly put our finger on. So we know, for instance, recitation of the Quran, as an example, is good for reducing anxiety. It's good for reducing stress. But exactly why? Some of this is from ilm al-ghayb, at least to us right now, right? So, I mean, there's a lot we can go into, but the key here is that Allah has given us the formula in its totality, right? And he told us in the Quran, right? He said, Taha ma anzalna alayka al-Qur'ana litashqa, right? Allah says that this, when he's telling the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we did not reveal this Quran to cause you distress. In other words, we revealed this Quran to bring you comfort. And so for the believer who really understands that, they will find their comfort, they will find their purpose. And I think purpose is the big key here. Of all the research on mental health, the biggest predictor is typically purpose in life. And religion gives people, and Islam gives us our purpose in life, right? Or else it's just, hey, life is busy. We got to get a good job. We got to get good grades. We got to go to the right college. We got to get to pay the bills, right? And that is not going to build any sort of thriving in life if that's the end goal, right? This is why people who have all that don't even feel good, right? You have millions of dollars, you got a home, right? You have a marriage, you have kids, but it's like, I still don't feel satisfied because there's something empty, which is Allah created us to worship him, right?
Yeah, that's huge, that idea of purpose in life. So mashallah, one of our participants added that, our relationship with Allah is always consistent and we should always put that before any other sorts of relationships, or trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So yeah, that's beautiful. I appreciate you guys chiming in. Please do engage, add stuff in the chat. That's fantastic. And so Dr. Uthman, I wanted to ask, what are some of those other factors that came up within your analysis that are, contribute to Muslim youth mental health?
Yeah, so as we said, religion was the biggest contributing factor for positive well-being and thriving as a human being. But it wasn't the biggest predictor of actually psychopathology, right? Which we could define as those mental illnesses. So Muslims, and just to give like those numbers, in this data we collected, right, about 350 Muslims all over the country, we had about 40% who met, who would be flagged for having depression. And we had about 47% who were flagged for having anxiety disorder. And the predictors of depression and anxiety, the biggest one that really, really mattered was people who claim that they don't like uncertainty in their life. In other words, they're not tolerant of uncertainty. They want life to be really predictable. They want life to be really certain, and they want to kind of be in control of things. And so I would like to speak a little bit about that because it is actually a really important religious concept that in our faith, right, we believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's in complete control of this universe, right? And we actually know that he has made this world an uncertain place, right? Like as Allah says in the Quran, right? He has hidden from us things like our sustenance is only known to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? Even things like when the rain is going to fall, like all these things about the dunya, Allah has said certainty only lies with him. And when we as human beings, and I think technology has done a lot to this in today's world because we're all living in a smartphone world where you can always find out whatever you want very quickly. Right. So it's like, hey, I want to know, what, how long it's going to take me to get somewhere. I pull out my GPS, I get the exact minute, I get the exact route. So we're craving certainty all the time. But what ends up happening is that there are moments in life where you will not get certainty. And if you don't get that certainty, then you kind of really, really fall apart. And so being tolerant of uncertainty is a really important psycho-spiritual concept. And there's so many ways we can probably unpack this, but that was probably one of the biggest findings of the research. Beyond that, we did find, again, the importance of peer relationships. So having healthy, healthy relationships with your friends, where you feel like you have friends, you get along with them, you enjoy their company. And of course, that's been a challenge in the pandemic. So I know everyone has gone into this virtual mode, right? We're here today on Zoom, right? I wish we could have been in person, right? But that people have to really, really think hard about making physical like interaction with one another, right? So even if there's a chance to hang out virtually, that probably won't get you the mental health benefits that if you actually go together, meet at the masjid, right? Meet at the coffee shop. So Muslim youth need to initiate, right? That type of physically meeting with one another. And then parental relationships are huge, right? Even in adolescence, as as we begin to interact more with our peers and conflicts with parents arise, it is one of the biggest predictors of our well-being is that do we still have a sound relationship with our parents, right? That we are able to speak to them openly, right? They can speak to us openly. And so for all the youth who are here, who are likely, we all go through this period of life in adolescence where we don't feel our parents see eye to eye with us, to begin and try our best to say, look, that's inevitable reality, right? When you grow up, the world has changed. And I have kids who are young. I don't understand what it's like to be a 12-year-old in 2022, because I was a 12-year-old, right? In whatever it is, 1994, right? So it's such a different world. But we have to begin to break those barriers down and say, hey, so what is it like? Like, what are you struggling with? Like, what do you enjoy? Like, what are you having hard difficulty with? And so youth and parents really going back and forth and not agreeing on everything, but just saying, I understand your perspective, right? That's very, very important.
No, I love that. There's that wonderful quote from Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, who says, do not raise your children the way your parents raise you, for they were born for a different time. And it's true, right? That's a sort of cultural divide, that generational gap that's going to exist, and we're going to have those communication gaps, etc. But that's true of any relationship we have with anybody, right? You move in with your spouse for the first time, there's going to be communication gaps. There's going to be, and that's true with your siblings. It's just the way it is to have to get along with anybody who's different from you. And there's so much we can learn just by going through those hurdles and those obstacles together. So alhamdulillah for that. Sleep was a big one Anybody else find that sleep is one of those big things that really impacts your mental health? You can chime in how you feel when you don't get your good night's sleep. But Dr. Uthman, are there any sort of tips you have for good sleep hygiene? Anything that you do that you could recommend?
Yeah, jazakumullah khair. So this was a finding that was, I won't say surprising, but I know that when we had initially said, let's measure the youth's sleep habits, there was kind of like, oh, like, do you think that matters? And I was like, I think it matters, but I was surprised at how much it mattered. So it had a very strong relationship, right, with youth mental health and well-being, both the positive and the negative side of things. And so when we talk about sleep, the way that we think about it, it's frequent, it's duration of sleep, right? It's quality of sleep, right? And also it's a consistency of one's schedule. And I remember, again, being in that age of life where it's like the teenage years and those, when between like 16 and like 25, it's like, I remember going to bed at like 2 and 3 in the morning some days and getting up at like 6 or 7 in the morning, and then pulling all-nighters because I have like an exam or a project due. And then like, I realize it now that like so many times I'd be a wreck because I didn't understand why, but it's like literally I was functioning on like, 4 hours of sleep over 2 days, right? So, and today we're living in a world where, people game a lot, right? And so if you're gaming late into the night, right? And if we're, watching Netflix and YouTube like late into the night, right? That blue light is also going to mess with your sleep cycle. It's going to mess with your, your circadian rhythm essentially. So it's so important that despite there's like all this desire to do things late into the night online, it's kind of where all this stuff is happening, to sometimes set boundaries for ourselves and say, can we just say, this is a time that I should aim to sleep every single night. And this is the time I'm trying to wake up every night. And of course, there's times where you're going to break that just because of life. And I'm not saying be a robot, but have a general like routine that you say, look, I got to have a bedtime that's reasonable. Why? I got to sleep at least, hopefully, youth are sleeping no less than 8 hours a night. And I know when I say that, many are going to say, oh, 8 hours, oh my God, right? But really, you should be sleeping more than that. So minimum of 8 hours. So try and see if you can come up with a block of time that works for you, that you say, I can get 8 quality hours of sleep. So what can you do to stop the bad habits? Put the phone and the technology away, far from you, because it's so, sometimes you're lying down and then you hear a beep from your social media and you hear a beep from WhatsApp and you hear a beep from that. And even if you don't check the phone, you heard it, and your mind is all of a sudden like, who's there? What do they want? What do they want from me? Like, what's happening in the world? And then maybe FOMO kicks in and you're like, I got to go check it, right? So maybe power down the phone, turn it on silent, do something to not allow it to intrude, right, on that personal space of yours. So how about you? I mean, yeah, I know you think a lot about sleep, and someone asked a question actually about, is oversleeping just as bad? So maybe you want to speak a little bit to that.
Well, that's a really good question. I think generally research has found that oversleeping can make one feel more depressed or lower in mood. So yes, there is an optimal sort of a sweet spot, which you want for sleep. Around 8 hours is generally good and healthy for us. I'm really diligent about my sleep. I have been since I was young. I know everybody pulled all-nighters and they were like that in university, but I was just, no. School or work is never going to get in the way of sleep. So no, subhanAllah, I totally feel you when I heard the results that sleep was so important to Muslim youth mental health. No, I totally get that. And yeah, I'm about that whole idea of sleep hygiene, not taking electronics into the room, not working ever in the room as well. Like maybe you have your desk space in your actual room, but I find that when I have that, I don't know, I start having nightmares about my work and what I'm gonna write, and it just gets into you. So temperature, all of that. And exercise is such an important factor too. You can find the most optimal time of the day that's good for you to exercise. I find that for me, I kind of need to wind down at the end of the day, put my son into bed, then exercise, and I feel that helps me sleep. But everybody is different. So yeah, trying different kind of, I don't know, try to find your actual good routine that actually works for you, inshallah. But all of those are great tips. If you guys have any sorts of things that you do to help wind down before bed that you can share, of course, we can all learn from each other, inshallah, please do. That's always lovely to hear from everybody else. What was the next question? Sister Heather, do you want to ask us the next question, inshallah?
Sure, inshallah. So the next question we have is actually how to feel less vulnerable and embarrassed due to mental health. So if you would like to touch upon that.
That's a great question. I think you're also kind of touching on that idea of mental health stigma and how it's really difficult to be brave and to feel that you can get up the courage to even tell someone that you are struggling, let alone get the courage to actually go and get help. How do we destigmatize mental health is a big question. I think it starts with, if you are feeling that you're in this vulnerable space, maybe a safe space that you can talk is one of those phone lines, call into a Muslim youth helpline, or there's a Muslim women's helpline as well. Talking to someone anonymously or through chat, if talking on the phone feels a little bit hard or feels difficult, that can be a way to sort of break the ice and take those baby steps. After that, you can try to talk to someone close to you, whether it's your sibling, whether it's a close friend, and then maybe your parents, if you do feel comfortable, or to campus mental health services, or to the counselor at school. Just kind of find ways to take those sorts of baby steps so that you can feel safe in talking about what you're going through. And maybe first it starts with writing it down, because sometimes we don't even know how to articulate it. We don't even know what we're going through. So journaling and having that relationship with yourself, inshallah, can be some of those first steps. Dr. Uthman, was there anything you wanted to add there?
Yeah, I would just add something from the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And I think sometimes the stigma is on the side of like other people, but sometimes it's on the side of the individual who's suffering. They're like, wait, this shouldn't be happening. I'm maybe not a good person, or maybe I'm not religious enough, and all these other, kind of whispers of Shaytan that make you not want to deal with this reality. And I go back to a hadith of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, which actually had to do nothing with mental health, it had to do with physical health, right? Or physical equilibrium. And the Prophet Muhammad SAW told us that, that one of you should not go for salah, right? If they need to go to the restroom, right? And then he actually even told us if food is served, right, that you should eat the food and not pray for it. Because if you go and you pray, if imagine someone serves a delicious meal, it's like, wait a minute, don't eat it, go to your salah first. And then you're gonna say Allahu Akbar, and you're just thinking about what is that biryani gonna taste like, right? So it's like the Prophet is telling us, if you have a physical need, right, a physiological need, go and take care of that physiological need first, because you can't focus if your mind is distracted by holding in the bathroom or anything else. And so the whole goal of the Prophet Muhammad SAW is telling us that, look, whatever intrudes on your ability to focus, that needs to be addressed. And that is the priority. And so if physical stuff can impede our ability to think clearly, what about things that are happening actually in our mind, right? If you have stuff in your mind that's going on. And so the believer should be like, there's no, like, I should not feel bad about this. I wouldn't be like, hey, I broke my leg, but I can't tell anybody I broke my leg and I'm like limping around, like, hobbling on one leg. No, I have a physical ailment and I shouldn't be embarrassed that I have that. And the exact same thing, if I have anything that's on my mind, that I should have no problem feeling like that's not, like, it's okay to have something I need to deal with myself, right? And a lot of the times it's not caught, like if someone knocked you over and you got, again, broke your arm or leg, right? It's not your fault, right? And many times when people are suffering from anything else, like anxiety or depression or anything else, it's not your fault all the time, right? This is a crazy world we're living in. We're living in a pandemic, right? With like inflation, like we have like a war going on. Like there's a million things that are happening that are going to induce this. There's Islamophobia, there's racism, there's, violence against, gendered violence. So there's millions environmental factors. So someone should be like, look, this is not on me, right? It's okay that I talk about this with someone else, find the tips, find the tools, right? And I go through this process of healing. It's from the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, right? The companions would come and ask, like, we're getting all these thoughts, like, what do we do, right? So, this is the best of people have these issues, right? We're not going to be immune to them as well, right?
I want to point out that someone asked a question: how can we destigmatize mental health in a community or a household that doesn't want to see it as an issue?
Yeah, it's a big question. I saw that. Some of the things I guess I try to do to try to destigmatize it within our community is to have these sorts of mental health events within our masajid, bring it up with our imams, ask them to have those khutbahs on mental health, just be able to have that, begin that conversation, if it is our parents, our grandparents, et cetera, who are having a hard time kind of understanding, is mental illness real, what's going on, et cetera, right? Beginning that conversation within a space that we all feel safe in, inshallah, is one of the good ways to start. But it's hard. Like it's one of those big questions that we're all trying our best to kind of work with. But yeah, Brother Uthman, what are some things that you try to do?
Again, I want to go back to saying, when we think about mental health, we're not only talking about bad things, right? So it's really important because many people have nothing, they're not depressed, right? Or they're not anxious, they're not suffering from any other, psychological ailment of such, but they're also just kind of, languishing was a word that came about kind of in the pandemic, right? You just don't feel like you're thriving. And that's probably very natural in the state of affairs that we've been in for the last year and a half. So we don't want to also tell people that, look, as long as, everyone is not sick, right? Then somehow we're good to go. You can say, I don't feel horrible, but I don't feel great either. And this is something which we need to, where else are you going to go to learn about this than through your faith community, right? Say our deen, if it's going to give us a purpose in life, we need to tell people, hey, well, how are we supposed to be living? Are we just capitalists here? Are we just materialists? This is what we're being taught in this country and in the West and actually all over the world now, right? So our worldview is shaped by all these other ideologies. And then we have the audacity to say, well, why are you not feeling good? Right? Why are you not thriving? Right? Everything I'm being told actually is not part of my fitrah. So the masjid is huge in this. And also, and for youth, when I think the question that came up is sometimes parents don't want to acknowledge that, hey, just suck it up, right? And sometimes a lot of the issues that parents don't want to admit, it's like the parental pressure they're putting as well, right? We're living in a world where especially if we're talking to, Muslim immigrants, right? For the most part, children of immigrants, it's like A+ or you're a terrible person, right? And that type of pressure, it's the person is totally normal, right? I'm fine. I don't have any sort of ailment, but every day I got to go to school. And when I take an exam or when I have a homework assignment, that fear, if I don't get perfection, I'm going to come home and get berated and all this stuff. So that's about setting expectations with parents and saying, look, if I don't get 100%, right? Do I need to feel like I'm this terrible person? And hopefully the parents will say, you know what? No, right? You're not, right? But that's the type of stuff that the parents and youth have to sit together and calibrate. What do you expect out of me? And what is realistic, right? And then if they expect something out of you that's not realistic, right? How do you push back in a certain way? Who do you get to get involved? Do you need to have an uncle? Do you have to have an aunt? And I tell this to people all the time, especially parents who are you can have a 2.0 GPA, and you can still end up becoming this. When people want to focus, they're going to focus. Sometimes not succeeding in school is because I'm not engaged in school. It's not that I'm not smart enough. It's just I don't want to be engaged for all these other factors. So just talk to your parents and be like, look, some of the stress you're putting on me is actually what's making me in this state of being. If you backed off a little bit, and I can say this all respectfully, right? I'll be in a much better frame of mind, right? And maybe that helps parents say, okay, you know what? Like my child has pointed the finger back at me. I've told them, hey, what's wrong with you? And you have no excuse. And they're like, well, you know what? You're putting this undue pressure. Hopefully, right? They'll back off just a bit, right? So, Allahu Alam, right?
Well, those are great points, Dr. Arthur. And it comes from the Sunnah as well, that idea of bringing a mediator in, having those, those uncles or aunts come in and help to mediate when you are having those family difficulties really does help. Alhamdulillah. Yeah, in my research as well, I found that, it was really surprising that when South Asian youth, and a lot of them were Muslims, when they talked about what were the major stressors on their mental health, it was family relationships, it was family conflicts. And number one, yes, academic pressure was one. And then number two, sort of relationship pressure, you could say, around, getting married, not being able to date, not having relationships, or sort of parameters in which their parental expectations essentially, and how they were different from their own. So that's tough, right? That idea that it was surprising that Islamophobia or being bullied or outside kind of factors weren't what was actually stressing our youth out. It was what was happening in the homes, subhanAllah. So yes, it is this sort of communication gap that I think all of us have had to contend with, and we're kind of working through. But yes, having those mediators does help, inshallah.
I think we need a follow-up webinar for the parents, inshallah, as well.
Another question, which is very similar to what you were just talking about, is can you please discuss managing stress and depression while in college, and how can it be dealt with Islamically?
But Farah, why don't you start us off?
I felt for me going in through university, what helped a lot was having a really regular exercise routine, going to the gym every day. Or Dr. Thorne, did you take jiu-jitsu in undergrad too? Is that what you said? or things like that.
Anytime you do martial arts is good.
Yeah, right. Alhamdulillah. So being involved in those, and then being involved in the MSA or within the masjid as well, having that community or that social bonding, I felt really helped just to anchor. It's part of anchoring your purpose in life, and then surrounding yourself with that suhbah, that beautiful righteous companionship. It just helps you, it motivates you, it reminds you of what your real purpose is, so you don't get caught up in, the exam that's coming up or whatever it might be. That helped a lot for me. Dr. Rahman.
Yeah, I would just say it's taking, and this question I know is about college, which I think is a very tough time in life, but and it's tough because people often put so much, it seems so high stakes, as if like nothing matters more than getting like an A in this class and getting a high GPA in order to get a job. And I would just start by saying that is absolutely not true, right? I teach in the university, you teach in the university, right? Like, we both have been through this. Like, the best actually professionals are not the ones with the highest GPAs. In fact, I remember even when I was an engineer, oftentimes the managers and the directors were the ones that had like a B average, and like, the 4.0s who have like no social skills and like no other like balanced lifestyle, right? They're just the ones who sit and do like the, like the busy work essentially. So just to say, look, you have to ask yourself a question. Am I living a holistic lifestyle? So you mentioned like, am I sleeping well? Am I exercising? Do I have friends, right? Am I involved in an MSA or MSU or any sort of religious community or the masjid, right? And if you can check off that, yes, I'm living a balanced life, then likely you're going to be doing much better. But if you're saying, look, all I do is go to class, right? I study, right? And then I stress about the exam, right? And everything, and I'm an intern, and I'm in all these clubs that are academic in nature, and I'm just a machine to be a successful material human being. That's going to lead to a lot of problems because you're going to get setbacks. I think a lot of times we're taught that if you just work hard, you'll always succeed. This is nonsense. This is absolute nonsense. People work incredibly hard and they will fail. And that is part of life, right? The prophets did everything right, and they sometimes still didn't achieve what they had hoped to achieve, right? People just don't believe, as an example, right? So you're gonna fail. You're gonna get setbacks. You're gonna fail an exam. You're gonna, do bad on a project. And to say, first of all, like, that's okay, right? You need to have some sense of self-compassion. Like, we're not angels, right? We're not machines. I will fail once in a while. What's the big deal, right? I will get up. I'll do it all over again. If I get a B, my life is not going to end. If I get a C, a D, or F, my life is not going to end. And again, putting things in perspective. Like, why was I created just to be a doctor? No, right? I was created to be a good Muslim, right? To worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if that happens through the world of being a successful, doctor, then great. but you might have to reorient if that is not what's written for you, right? Or you have to reorient. If whatever might be, you'll find your calling in life. I always say this, Allah opens doors and Allah closes doors, right? And some doors that close, we want to bang on them and say, you got to open, you got to open. Allah has closed some of those doors. Follow the open doors, right? Just like be like water, like just flow through whatever it is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has destined for you, rather than be really just kind of upset and annoyed and just like, no, I deserve this. Like, and if I don't get it right, I'm miserable. So I think the big answer is just be balanced and be true to yourself, right? An hour in the gym sometimes is better than the 3 hours you studied, by the way, right? Right? Or 30 minutes reading Quran might give you barakah in your 2 hours of studying, right? And I actually remember that from my own college years where, people used to say like, don't you guys ever study? And yeah, we would study, but not as much as many of the other brothers and sisters, because we were doing a lot of campus activism. And I deeply believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put barakah in the few hours we studied. So that way we were able to succeed in our college as well as able to succeed in our dawah. So.
Oh, mashallah, beautiful points. And I found too in my research that young people often said that college or university was actually the place where they were able to have access to mental health services, whether it's the chaplain, the Muslim chaplain maybe on campus, or to campus mental health services. They didn't have that access when they were in high school or younger. And now they were actually in an environment where, you're on campus, you're at school, so it's easy to go and get help if you need it. So inshallah, remember that there is that opportunity for you and those doors are open for you, inshallah, as well.
Jazakallah khairan, that was beautifully explained. Another question we had is, are mental health problems always from Shaytan? So that kind of touches upon, you're talking about being in college, and earlier you're talking about being with your community. So again, are mental health problems always from Shaytan?
That's a tricky one to think through. There are things that are from Shaytan, and Shaytan constantly whispers to us different things. And Allah talks about actually some of those things that He whispers to us. Like Allah says in the Quran, "Ash-shaytanu ya'idukum al-faqra wa ya'murukum bil-fahsha." Right? Shaytan will kind of whisper to us and tell us like we're going to fail, right? We're going to be poor, we're not going to make it. And then he kind of uses that to command us to do things that are immoral, right? So there is an element of Shaytan's whispering to us all the time and trying to get us to say, well, you know what? You're not doing so well. Like, this religion of yours, whatever it is, like, well, why are you praying if it's not making you feel better, right? And so Shaytan often can be our biggest enemy, but sometimes it's not Shaytan, right? Especially like I think Ramadan is coming, right? And Ramadan's coming, the Shayateen are locked up and we're kind of left to our own devices in many ways. And sometimes we're our own worst enemies. And I said this like in the last regard, like if you have a problem with something and you beat yourself up over it, right? It's not Shaytan who's beating you up over it. You're beating yourself over this. So I give this example all the time. It goes back to self-compassion, right? That the way we need to talk to ourselves is so much more important than the way that because we can't control how other people talk to us, right? Someone will come and say something horrible to me. It could be anybody, someone I love or I hate, but I can't control what's coming out of their mouth or their mind. But I can control how I speak to myself, right? And I always use this example. I think it's beautiful. Imagine if your best friend failed at something. What would you do to your best friend? Would you go to them and say, hey, you're terrible, you're dumb, you're such a loser? You would never say that. You'd be like, it's okay, everyone makes mistakes, inshallah you do better tomorrow. And you come with that compassion. But sometimes when you speak to ourselves, we do the exact opposite. Like, well, why are you suffering? Why are you not succeeding? And why are you not thriving? And you're such a this, you're such a that. So that's from our nafs, right? Maybe Shaytan had kind of insinuated some of these things at some point, but then we took the baton from him, right? So of course we make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect us from the evils of Shaytan and his whispering, right? But we also have to work on our own individual resiliency, right?
I have one more question from which is kind of similar to what you were talking about, which was what would be the advice from an Islamic perspective to dealing with feelings of self-hatred and self-victimization?
So a couple, I can maybe, unless you want to go, I have a couple of fleeting thoughts on this. The self-victimization I want to speak quite a bit about. The self-hatred, maybe we can begin early. First of all, this notion that we have a culture, I have to say this, it's coming from our immigrant culture, I think in many ways, not our Islamic culture, of using guilt and shame on people to kind of coerce them to live a certain way, right? And so it's, we talk about this in parenting behaviors, it's using psychological control, right? So when your parents or someone else, your relatives, will guilt you and shame you into behaving a certain way or being a certain person, that is a type of motivation that's shown to be very maladaptive. But what ends up happening is that people absorb that, right? They absorb that as I am a person who should feel shame all the time, and I should always feel guilty about who I am as a person. And so now it's become this thing that you've internalized that you're this horrible person, right? And you have very low self-esteem and self-worth. The first, and I would say, step back and realize the ultimate being that one should attach to is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He gives you your worth. It's not coming from anybody else. It's not from your spouse. It's not from your parents. It's not from your best friends, because everyone at some point in life might get mad at you. They might throw you under the bus, right? People will constantly disappoint you. This is the nature of this life. People will constantly disappoint you. And we have stories from the prophets where their wives and their kids and like the people they love them the most, backstab them, so don't expect that the people who you love are going to be, perfect to you all the time, but don't get your self-worth from them. And in our culture, we get our self-worth, unfortunately, from other people. We look at, what do my friends think of me? My friends think highly of me. I think about myself in a positive light. And if my friends think that I'm not a great person, right, then I must be this terrible person. Get your worth from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that He has honored the human being, right? وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ, right? We have honored the human being, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves us more than anyone else is ever going to love us. And so if that becomes your place that you attach to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and say, He loves me, He cares for me, He gives me my worth, then that should be enough to at least insulate from like this, I'm this terrible person, right? Number two, you talked about self-victimization. I'm going to caution my dear brothers and sisters against Muslims in the West have become very, we kind of copy what other racialized minorities are doing. And we have this tendency to kind of externalize all bad things that are happening. So, well, anytime someone does something to me, well, that's a microaggression, right? Anytime someone's, and it may not have been. So our vocabulary, we need to be very mindful of, not seeing the world through this lens that I am a victim, that people are out to get me. Sometimes people are just not good with their words. It was a misunderstanding. You actually are the one that didn't interpret what they said. They said it correctly, right? But you're looking at things through a lens that's not right. So my advice is actually, we can't solve, right, the political problems right now. Like, we're not going to be able to solve them overnight. And so if we just say that we're this victimized minority, we're just going to sit there and just loathe and just be in a bad state. So you know what? I can't fix that today, but I can fix how I think about these things. And I can try to see the world in a positive light. So instead of looking at microaggressions all the time, also we should be looking at, I like to call them micro acts of kindness, right? Which we're not taught. That's a word I kind of made up, right? And I actually spoke to, I remember the dean at our university about this, because he was very keen on, hey, we got to stop microaggressions. But I said, look, people will aggress against you. And if you constantly look at that and you say like, oh my God, this person is against me and I'm this victim, that's only going to make you feel worse and worse and worse and worse. But to stop sometimes and say, look, are people doing nice things for me that I didn't even realize? People smiled at me randomly when they didn't have to, right? When they offered me their hand in a way, right? They complimented me. No one was, they went out of their way to do an act of kindness. Do you look at those and are you grateful for those? So a disposition of gratitude can inshallah counteract some of those kind of the harms of self-victimization that's out there. And I'm not saying this to belittle like the structures that are putting pressure on people, right? Because of their gender, because of their race, because of their religion. All I'm saying is that if we just live in that world of waiting for them to be fixed, they're not going to be fixed, and we're never going to find peace in our hearts.
No, that's brilliant, Dr. Uthman. Now, you speak really also to that idea of neuroscience, where our brain is generally wired to focus only on those difficult or those what are deemed threatening situations, right? It's like a 6-to-1 ratio is needed for our brain. Those sticky memories or those threatening or those dangerous or those microaggressions. And then, so you need 6 good, positive experiences to counteract every one negative experience you've gone through. So you really do have to be intentional. It has to be this very deliberate process where, no, you know what, I'm going to try to think about those micro acts of kindness, etc., those small random acts of kindness that we do receive every day. And again, not to belittle all those systems of oppression, et cetera, that we do live within. And also just to speak to Dr. Uthman, you mentioned that idea of self-compassion, how important that is to, building up our idea of self-worth and our mental strength. So there's this sort of this really nice activity you can do, which is really nice. So again, something you can try out at home. But just like what was Dr. Uthman was saying, we say all these wonderful, kind things to our best friend or to our sibling, someone we love, but we never say those kind words to ourselves, right? That negative self-talk is something, again, we very deliberately and intentionally have to counteract, because we've spent a lifetime, it's probably our childhood, we spent a childhood saying those awful things to ourselves. And it comes from a place, right? It's usually a protective mechanism. It's probably coming out of maybe difficult situations that you've gone through, and you've kind of adapted by saying these unkind things to yourself, like, I'm not good enough. And that drives you towards greater perfection. And in the short term, perhaps it gives you some benefits, but in the long run, of course, it starts to eke away at your self-worth. And so this idea of writing all the good qualities that you like about someone, and then thinking about it towards yourself, or writing yourself a letter as if you're that wonderful person that you love and adore, and all those wonderful positive things you would say to someone else, you say to yourself instead. And think too about some of those negative self-thoughts that you do say to yourself on a regular basis, and try very deliberately to counteract them. Stop yourself when you are saying those negative things to yourself, and to catch yourself, and being in that process of pausing and reflecting and doing the opposite. So giving those positive praise to yourself, we never really praise ourselves, helps to stop and break that cycle of violence. And it is a cycle of violence, right? A violence that you're committing against yourself. But inshallah, we have it within our power to be able to stop that.
Okay. And I'll just add to that, gratitude journaling itself, like, it's a really, really powerful tool. Like, I've done it myself for years. I encourage my friends and family to do it. Just before you go to bed every night, just stop and take like 30 seconds or a minute, write down 3 or 5 things that you're grateful for today, right? That will begin, like, people, the way you see the world will change. Right? And I think that's like the difference between like the believer who really has a good grasp on the world versus the believer who's kind of struggling with this, right? And Allah describes it in the Quran. Allah describes how people see the exact same thing. One person views it in a very negative light, one sees it in a very positive light. So, just you stop your day and you just write these things down, and all of a sudden what you're going to realize is, as you're walking throughout the world, you're like, oh my God, I appreciate that so much. Oh my God, oh wow, that cool breeze. Oh, that like beautiful tree. Like, oh, those beautiful clouds in the sky. Oh, that person that just smiled at me. Like, you just see like good things all the time, right? Versus like, oh, that person like frowned at me. Oh, and that cloud is gray, right? And oh, that grass is dead, right? So it's just, it changes the way it literally changes your sight, right?
The next question that we have is, how can I avoid instantly reacting on the internet if I am facing problems? What is the best way to get out your frustration?
They may not like my answer, Dr. Faras. Maybe you want to give them yours.
Is your answer put away your phone, put away your devices? No, if you know that that's sort of your go-to, you want to go and react, you want to, I don't know, whatever it is, publicly post about something horrible that happened to you that day, and kind of the aftermath of what happens every time you do that. I think part of it is putting away the devices, going for a walk, going with a friend who knows that you go through that and knows that you want to stop this, inshallah. Just to reconnect with nature, reconnect with the person, or go to the masjid. Just get yourself out of that environment, inshallah. Because I believe it's something that you'd want to kind of try to counteract. Dr. Uthman, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I would say yours is like a good first step is like, try to see if stepping back from that. First of all, never respond, like general rule of thumb, an email, social media message, anytime you get something comes your way that's kind of getting you charged up, give yourself 24 hours before you ever respond, right? That's just a rule of thumb. It could be from your spouse, it could be from your child, it could be from your best friend, and it could be from an enemy. Just sleep on it and give yourself 24 hours. But being very honest with my young brothers and sisters, do your best to just get off of social media as much as you possibly can. Like, we all know that there's some good you can get from it, but there's also so much harm. And now the data is becoming very clear, especially for our young sisters, by the way. It's even more clear. I know with Instagram, we're finding that young women who use Instagram especially, right, suffer from a whole lot more, right, mental health challenges, right, than even young men who use it. And there's a reason behind that. There's a sexualization element there, and everyone is photoshopped and everyone's comparing themselves. But the more you can try, like Ramadan is coming, I'm going to ask everyone to try, Ramadan is a month of abstaining, right? The word literally saum means to refrain and abstain. 30 days, try to fast from social media. Just try, right? And see how much better your life is, right? And if you find like you don't need it, then you don't need it. And if you feel like you need it, then you can come back on, inshallah, use Dr. Farah's advice of like, look, anytime something gets charged. And also to remove that, like you control like your feed. Don't allow toxic people to be, pop into your feed, right? So you have to just, I always say this, like you have to do like spring cleaning. We talked about that back in the day. You go through and you clean out your attic. You got to do it on your social media feed. Go through everybody who you quote unquote follow and say, which person is actually bringing me like negative thoughts and feelings, and just remove them completely. Unfollow them. And you do this regularly until you're like, look, the people who are on my feed are either giving me something of benefit in this dunya or benefit for the akhirah. Because you're not getting good in this life or the next, like, you know what, this is a total waste of time, right? So just being mindful of who it is that you're allowing into your heart, essentially.
We have one more question here. If anyone else has any more questions, again, you can private message me or Abdullah or Sister Huda, inshallah. I have one more question here. It's do you have any advice on how to manage time, just in general or throughout college or work, etc.? How to manage all the different components of life alongside your Islamic obligations?
Yeah, bismillah. Okay, I'll take a stab at it. So I have personally found that block scheduling and actually having a very regimented routine is extremely helpful for having continuity in your day and always feeling like you know what's supposed to come. So when I say block scheduling, it literally, I mean taking out like a Google Calendar or an Excel spreadsheet and documenting every single thing that you're supposed to do throughout this week. Right. And it doesn't need to be something which you do every week, but you have a general routine. So you say, okay, look, I get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and I pray Fajr, right? What am I going to do from 6:30 until 8 o'clock, right? Maybe that's your time for, shower, breakfast, Quran reading, whatever it might be. And then from 8 to whatever it is, I go to school, I go to work. And what I like about this is it allows you to see where is my life lacking in something. And if you filled out your calendar and you're like, wait a minute, I have absolutely no time in my calendar for socializing with my friends. Okay, that's a problem. If I filled out my calendar, I have absolutely no time in here for Quran and Islamic studies. That's a problem. I have no time for the gym. That's a problem. So by doing that, you will see where your life is imbalanced. And of course, you can update your schedule from time to time, quarter to quarter, semester to semester, but at least it gives you that sense of, I have a roadmap of what I'm supposed to be doing. And in your calendar, you also build in time for free time for just like unscheduled things. So maybe you're supposed to do something at 10 o'clock in the evening, right? And you're unable to do it. Right. So maybe you are 10 o'clock in the morning. And so you have at 6 o'clock in the evening, like a free hour. That's like whatever I didn't get done, I can get done. Or if I got everything done, I can just sit back, take a walk, decompress in some other way. So scheduling to me is really, really a powerful way to control our life as much as we can control it, while building in the opportunity, building in the chance of uncertainty and still accomplishing our goals.
Yeah, I agree with that too. That idea of work hard, play hard is kind of how I got through university. You do what you need to do, and then schedule or have in mind, this is how I'm going to reward myself if I finished, I studied for my exam, wrote all my notes, et cetera, and whether that's, taking a walk or getting to hang out with a friend that you really wanted to. And that's at the end of the week or at the end of the day when you've accomplished these things. You need something to look forward to. And I think that's an important thing that can motivate some of us to get through, hours and hours of studying. And just remembering those are your priorities, inshallah, at the end of the day. And sometimes we have to kind of deliberately go back and intentionally go back to what are those priorities? Is it to be a doctor at the end, or again, is it to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to please our creator? Did you want me to share some of those mental health resources or anything at this time, if you'd like? Inshallah. I can do that if you would like. Sister Huda or Brother Afnan, would you like me to share something?
Yes, that'd be great.
Okay, inshallah. Jazakallah khairan. Okay, let me do that. 2 seconds. But were there any other questions? So just before I do that, were there any other questions?
I have one more question. It's a little bit loaded though, but it's how do we ensure our confidence or self-love doesn't go so far as to bring in strong pride or arrogance? We know that the Prophet ﷺ advised against arrogance, especially for men, and that it leads to more trouble.
Yeah, it's a very good question. And it's a question that comes from a place of sincerity. So whoever asked it, that's a great question. But we should always worry that, we're not going so far and thinking we're amazing that it causes us to get arrogant. I would say that there's a couple of things. So the first is you differentiate. The idea of self-love is not saying anything about you're an amazing person, right? It's not saying that. It's saying I'm not a terrible person, right? I intrinsically love myself, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala intrinsically, like, he loves me because he created me, right? So even if I'm a sinner and I make mistakes and whatever it might be, right, I still love myself, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves me. Now, the difference is now when you succeed in life, and inshallah we do succeed in life, whether it be religiously, right, academically, professionally, the key always is that although that we are the ones that, quote unquote, have achieved that, who's the source of all this? And if, as long as you're grounded and saying, look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who actually made all this possible. And I don't just say that like kind of like as a script in your mind, but you have to deeply stop and reflect and say, look, like anything I've achieved, if I went to college and got a degree, right? Or I gave this wonderful lecture people liked, or I won the basketball game because I was the best player, what it might be, who gave you that genetic makeup to be able to do this? Who gave you the parents that helped you do this? Who gave you the resources that actually lived a lifestyle that allowed you to succeed in this way? All of this comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So if we say, alhamdulillah, Allah, you've given me the ability to achieve so much, that's a very praiseworthy thing, right? But if we say, well, it's all from me, right? And Allah had no role in it, right? That's where we talk about arrogance and kibr, and it's extremely blameworthy. So tie your success to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you'll be safe, inshallah, from that.
I think those secret acts of charity or good works that nobody else knows about, just between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, staying up at night in worship, and nobody else knows that you're up. All wonderful things that really eke away at your nafs, right? Tell you, put it in its place. SubhanAllah. But again, a lovely question, mashallah. Really important. May Allah always make us sincere in our actions. I mean, I'm just going to go into the resources, and inshallah, if there's more questions, inshallah, we'll get to that. So there are amazing, alhamdulillah, in terms of Muslim mental health, I feel like we live in a fantastic time where, we live in an amazing time where we have so many Muslim mental health resources available to us, alhamdulillah. So for example, you can text salam to 741-741, and a crisis worker will actually stay with you. If you're in a crisis, it's free, it's confidential, 24/7. And an amazing resource. There's a Muslim women's helpline. If you have your phone out, it's really great just to pop these numbers into your phone just to save them so you have them. But yeah, so there's a Muslim women's helpline. There's a Muslim youth helpline. Again, when it's difficult to talk to someone, you want someone more anonymous. There's also a live chat. Nasiha has a live chat, so that same 1866 Nasiha number. You can also just chat with someone.
You're still on the resources slide. I don't know. Maybe.
Oh, it's not moving. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, let me try to stop sharing. Let me try that again. My apologies there. But can you guys see a different screen now? No?
Hold on, it's loading.
Okay.
No, it's sharing the, I think, yeah, it's showing the PowerPoint, but it's not like, okay, there you go. Now it's moving. There you go.
Oh yeah, okay, sure. So let me try that again. So you can see text 741-741?
Yes.
Okay, so yes, so text the word salam, someone will stay with you. These are the two numbers, the Muslim women's helpline as well as the Muslim youth helpline. Again, it's also a free text service as well, the Nasiha one, which is fantastic. This is more Canadian, but there are a lot of resources here. So muslimmentalhealth.ca has compiled a lot of Muslim mental health resources, and I'm sure a lot of them are US specific as well. Inshallah. Khalil Center, of course, started.
Are you still on the salam slide? It's not moving from.
Not moving.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know why that happens actually.
Yeah, just I think, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, just try moving it that way. Just like
try moving it this way. Okay, guys.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go into. Okay. All right. So let me. Okay.
Okay.
Now
there we go. Yeah. Okay. Khalil Center. These are the numbers in case you don't have them. I put the Chicago numbers, I believe, up because maybe that's kind of central for you guys. We have some Muslim women's shelters here in Canada. If are there any equivalents, please do chat and send those in. Brother Afnan, you are nodding your head. What are the US equivalents of Muslim women's shelters?
I know that they exist. I don't have specific names.
Okay.
But
We actually have a lot for ICNA relief. I don't remember the specific locations either, but we have a lot along the East Coast. So I think we have some near South Carolina, Georgia area. and then a lot in New Jersey as well.
Fantastic. So ICNA Relief, if you're ever looking for those resources, inshallah. This is from the US as well, though. So the Peaceful Families Project, they have a great website. Any sorts of family violence, intimate partner violence, anything that might be happening within our homes. I think film is a really great way to talk about mental health. So the Roshni Project, for example, happened in Canada. I'm sure there are other equivalents in the US, but great short films, just people talking about youth mental health and what that means and what impacts it. It just helps us have a voice. Again, a great documentary, 14 and Muslim, really just interesting. Again, just speaks to our particular context. And again, representation matters. And so I love seeing that in terms of film. And there are some great mental health apps as well. If you're talking about, not being able to concentrate in prayer, needing that sort of bringing that stillness, etc., into your life again. Muraqaba, that idea of watchfulness and guided meditation. There are actually really cool mental health apps out there that have been developed that you can use, inshallah, for that. So alhamdulillah, we are really in an exciting time when it comes to Muslim mental health. Alhamdulillah.
On your point of kind of mindfulness, like just people need to get out more. We've been in COVID, we've been in four walls in front of a screen. Like one of the biggest predictors, we know that like walking around nature, right? These things are so good for us. So like that should be part of a schedule. Like we all take conference calls or we have webinar, we have all these things on our devices. You could literally like just put your phone right in your pocket and like your headphones on, take a walk in a park, be in green spaces, breathe fresh air. It is a huge component that we underestimate. So I can't recommend that enough, right? There you go, forest bathing. You've got it,
exactly. Right? The Japanese concept of forest bathing, which I love. Yeah, alhamdulillah. No, we have to go on spiritual retreats. That idea of khalwa, that having that kind of an aloneness with our Lord, kind of like, if you can't find that within this built space that we've, created and we live in every day, go out in nature and remind yourself of who is really the creator. Alhamdulillah.
Yeah, and I would add that, you can like taking a walk, and these things are therapeutic for like a period of time. But again, the pressure and the stress and the technology is on us 24/7. So I would highly, highly recommend, if people can, once in 6 months, once a year, go take a trip out in nature, no technology for 2-3 days. Like I've been doing this for about the last 15 years. And like the 3 best days of the year are the 3 days I don't have cell phone access to. I'm in the middle of a forest. There's nothing. There's, you have no idea. There could have been like a pandemic that started. Who knows what could have happened? It doesn't matter, right? It's 3 days of completely, your mind is just getting to, it's like just getting plugged into the charger, right? It's like, you're just like, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like, all you're doing is seeing his ayat, and you come back and you're just like rejuvenated, fresh, like, you're calm, right? And that won't work if you just say, I'm gonna go take a 10-minute walk, but it's gonna last for a few minutes. But doing that like intense, form of camping or something like that is very good for the soul. It also gets you comfortable with uncertainty, which I always talk a lot about. Like, like it might be cold, it might be hot. Be comfortable with discomfort. That's part of actually my last advice to the youth here, is that we live a culture of everything in our society is designed to make our lives more comfortable, right? So like, everyone markets to you, hey, you don't even have to type into Amazon anymore. Just talk to Alexa, right? You don't have to do this, you don't have to do that. Pick up the phone, call Uber Eats, do this, do that. Like actually inculcate some discomfort into your life as a way to make yourself resilient, right? So I say simple things that you can take, like cold showers. You can go take a walk, like, like barefoot. It's from the Sunnah of the Prophet Muhammad, right? You can go camping, right? Leave your cell phone at home when you're going to go shopping for a few hours and see can you deal with that uncertainty? Like just learn to be comfortable roughing it. Turn off the heater one night, right? Turn off the AC one day. And you'll just be like, okay, you know what? I can survive. I can deal with these stressors. And inshallah, that muscle gets stronger and stronger and stronger, because ultimately when Allah tests us with the inevitable stresses of life, we say, no, I can handle this, right? And if you're too used to luxury all the time, like, the one day you don't get that luxury, like you're a mess. Like I hear people say, oh my God, I have a headache. What happened? Well, I didn't eat my specific breakfast that I eat every single day. I'm like, you're a little bit too, you live a life that's too curated, right? Too much comfort, right? So step back, rough it a bit, embrace it actually, right?
I mean, that was a beautiful discussion we just had. Thank you so much, Dr. Farah and Dr. Osman. We pretty much went through all the questions we had. If there's anything else you guys want to add, you can do so. but otherwise, that should be it. Dr. Farah and Dr. Omarji. Is there anything else you guys would like to add before we close out for tonight?
We're good, inshallah. I think we've covered a lot. So always happy to continue chatting. And whether the report is there, people can read the report for more details. Right?
Yeah, so the report is, it'll be on the YM website tomorrow morning, and I'll also put it in the Zoom link, the Zoom chat right now, right in a minute. Thank you everybody for attending.
I'll add one thing real fast, Afnan, if you don't mind, which is additional resources. So alhamdulillah, Dr. Farah and I both are directors at Yaqeen Institute for Islamic Research. And we both direct the division on psychospirituality. So we actually have a ton of resources that are available for people who want more information on particular aspects of mental health. So we have papers written about trauma, an entire series that for those who have gone through trauma, which is very different than like a daily stressor, right? Those who really feel like they have something they need to go through. We have two wonderful authors who are actually putting it into a book, right? So that is a resource available. There's some additional papers. So if you just go to yaqeeninstitute.org and you just type in even mental health, or go to the, you'll see a whole bunch of things that are in there that will, inshallah, give you something. There's infographics, there's videos, right? There's a number of different things that you can use and inshallah benefit you. And stay tuned. Dr. Farah and I have a big paper coming out on mental health in the Muslim community. So
thank you so much for sharing this. I think it's really valuable. I'm definitely going to take a look at this later. But thank you guys so much for everyone for attending. Thank you, Dr. Farah and Dr. Omarji, for all the amazing input and insights you've given us about mental health in Islam and just in general. And the report link, I'll put it right now in the chat so you guys can take a look at that. Jazakallah. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.